Roughly 40 unfinished Clone Wars episodes were sitting in development when the show was cancelled. Among them was Anakin Skywalker standing beside the earliest foundations of the Death Star without knowing what it was, Ahsoka facing Darth Sidious alone inside the Jedi Temple, while a Sith shrine beneath her feet had been weakening the Order for centuries, Ventress dying to save the man she loved, while the Jedi Order that sanctioned her death marched towards its own, and Palpatine quietly destroying every criminal empire that could expose his war as a lie. Somewhere on Coruscant, Boba Fett and Cad Bane were walking towards each other for the last time, and the shot that followed would put a dent in that helmet forever. The people building those episodes thought they had years ahead of them. They did not. What the cancellation left behind was not random. The decision had been strategic, not creative, and it fell on a series with more material in development than it had ever produced in a single season. What survived arrived in pieces, 13 complete episodes as The Lost Missions in 2014, a final 12-episode season on Disney Plus in 2020, and 2 stories preserved in publishing. What did not survive was everything else, and what follows is the shape of what was lost. Beneath the individual stories, a larger shape was forming. Some arcs exposed the Empire's hidden foundations, others traced the rot inside the Republic's own institutions, and a final set followed Palpatine's campaign to remove rival power structures that could expose or disrupt his control. The Utapau story reels put Anakin face to face with the Empire's future weapon. 4 episodes of rough animation were released publicly under the title Crystal Crisis on Utapau, showing Anakin and Obi-Wan discovering a massive Kyber crystal being shipped by the Separatists. The crystal foreshadows the weapon that will one day wipe out Alderaan, and Anakin has no idea what he is standing next to. He fights to keep the crystal out of Separatist hands, never realizing that the side he's protecting it for has the same plans for it. But the arc carried more than dramatic irony. Throughout the story reels, Anakin and Obi-Wan are processing Ahsoka's departure from the Order, and their conversations reveal fractures in both characters that the films never had time to explore. Luceno's Catalyst explored the Death Star's political origins during this same time period, but the animated version would have made the connection deeply personal, placing Anakin at the source of the weapon his own son would one day bring down, while also showing him at his most emotionally exposed. Beneath the Jedi Temple, a Sith shrine had been weakening the Order for centuries. The temple on Coruscant was built on top of an ancient dark-side site, and James Luceno's novel Tarkin describes the effects directly. The dark side power had seeped upward and outward since the shrine was sealed away, infiltrating the hallways and rooms above. The Jedi believed that they had contained the shrine's energy when they built over it. They had not. The unmade Clone Wars arc would have brought that buried darkness into the story directly, following Ahsoka as she discovers a threat in the Coruscant Underworld, returns to the Jedi to warn them, and joins Obi-Wan and Anakin on a mission to rescue Yoda from the shrine itself. At the same time, Darth Sidious would attempt to break into the temple's holocron vault, with Ahsoka the only one standing in his way. The Jedi's willingness to lead a clone army without questioning its origins, their growing comfort with military force, their inability to detect Palpatine, all of it becomes harder to explain knowing the floor they meditated on every day sat above a wound in the Force that had been working against them for centuries. The shrine did not cause their blindness, it reflects it. Meanwhile, Ventress had traveled further than almost any character in the entire show. She began as Count Dooku's dark side enforcer, was betrayed and cast aside, returned to Dathomir and the Night Sisters, watched her people get wiped out by General Grievous, reinvented herself as a bounty hunter, and slowly, painfully, scraped together something that looked like purpose. The 8-episode arc adapted into Dark Disciple was supposed to complete that journey on screen, giving the character the farewell she had earned in the medium that created her. The Jedi Council assigns Quinlan Vos, a maverick Jedi known for bending the rules, to eliminate Count Dooku. Ventress trains him in the dark side so that he can get close enough to strike, and along the way, they fall in love. Vos is corrupted by the very darkness he invited in, and Ventress, the woman who spent the entire series clawing her way back from everything the galaxy threw at her, gives her life saving him. The former villain becomes the emotional center of the arc, and the weight of 5 seasons of transformation lands on that single moment. But underneath the loss sits something even harder to accept. The Jedi Order sanctioned a targeted killing, and that order makes Order 66 feel less like a sudden moral collapse and more like the endpoint of compromises that played directly into Palpatine's hands. Ahsoka Tano's departure from the Order opened a wound the show planned to deepen. The season 5 finale left her walking away from the Jedi after being framed for sabotage, tried by military court, and cleared too late to restore her faith in the institution that raised her. The planned continuation would have followed Ahsoka into the lower levels of Coruscant, originally alongside a character named Nix Okami, letting her see the Republic's collapse through the eyes of someone who had stopped believing in its most powerful institution. The 2020 final season addressed this territory through the Trace and Rafa Martez storyline, a heavily reworked version of the original plan that replaced Nix Okami with new characters and a narrower scope. It became one of the most debated stretches of the final season. The sisters gave Ahsoka a window into civilian life during wartime, but the original concept was reportedly wider in scope and darker in what it revealed about how far the Republic's neglect of its own people had gone. By following Ahsoka outside the temple, the show would have placed the Republic's collapse at street level, visible block by block to anyone standing close enough to the ground. If these arcs had been produced in order, the shrine would have been the reason Ahsoka returned to the Jedi. The walkabout would have been the reason she nearly left for good, and the Siege of Mandalore would have been the moment she came back one last time, knowing it was already too late. Elsewhere, Mon Cala would have given Padme her most important story outside the films. Growing concerned with Palpatine's refusal to leave office past his term, Padme travels to Mon Cala to seek support from King Lee Char and Senator Mina Tills in voting him out. What she finds instead is a political landscape already collapsing around her. The Quarren chieftain Nasor Ree is reportedly dead, and Senator Tikis, who takes power in his place, turns out to be a separatist. Every door Padme opens closes in front of her, and the democratic tools she believed in fail one by one. The arc was designed as a direct setup for the deleted scenes from Revenge of the Sith, where Padme, Bail Organa, and Mon Mothma began organizing what would eventually become the Rebel Alliance. It would have been the clearest portrait of what political resistance looked like before the rebellion existed, senators waging a losing fight with words inside a system already turned against them. The Clone Wars had always been the strongest when it gave political struggles the same dramatic weight as battlefield ones, and this arc would have placed Padme at the center of a fight the audience already knew she would lose. The planned Kashyyyk arc would have explored why Yoda had such strong ties to the Wookiees before Revenge of the Sith, something the film treats as a given but never sets up. The arc reportedly involved Trandoshan aggression and the deeper tensions between the two species on the planet, placing Yoda in a world where his bond with an entire civilization carried personal weight far beyond what the Council chambers could hold. When Yoda later fights alongside the Wookiees in Revenge of the Sith and watches Order 66 tear through their ranks, that scene would have carried grief the film only implies. Both arcs were doing exactly what the Clone Wars did best, providing the why behind the film's what, and turning assumptions into earned narrative beats. One unrealized concept would have pushed the show into entirely new territory. Among the unfinished stories was a Vong-like scout ship arc built around alien abduction energy, a shift towards cosmic dread unlike anything in a normal battlefield episode. Clone troopers encountering something that could not be fought with blasters or strategy, something alien in a way the galaxy had never seen. The concept would have broken the show's established rules on purpose, and the willingness to go that far says everything about where the creative team believed the series could go. Another planned arc would have paired Rex with R2-D2, beginning with a fighter-pilot rivalry and turning into a darker survival story after Rex was stranded with R2 and a reprogrammed battle droid. A clone trooper built for war, stripped of everything that gave him identity, forced to define himself without rank, brothers, or command. Among all the unrealized arcs, it may have been the smallest in scale and the most personal in what it asked of its central character. It would have reshaped how the audience understood Rex heading into the Siege of Mandalore, showing a soldier who had already lost everything before Order 66 took away what little he had left. Beyond the Jedi and the Republic, Palpatine was fighting a war nobody else could see. The Maul and Shadow Collective arc, preserved in the Son of Dathomir comic, follows Maul's escape from Sidious's captivity and his desperate attempt to rebuild his underworld empire by drawing on remaining Shadow Collective loyalists, including Mandalorian fighters, Black Sun, the Pikes, and Hutt interests. What follows is a multi-sided conflict involving Maul's forces, Sidious's separatist armies, and Jedi and Republic intervention. The arc ends with Mother Talzin reaching through the Force for her son one last time before Grievous cuts her down, giving everything so Maul could escape. Her sacrifice was meant to be heard in her voice, felt in the silence that followed, and seen in Maul's face as he realized what it cost. The Shadow Collective is shattered, and Maul flees with what remains of his loyalists. The comic preserved the story, but 5 seasons of Clone Wars animation had been building towards exactly this kind of moment on screen. What the arc reveals is larger than any single battle. Palpatine was not just controlling 2 governments, he was destroying, piece by piece, any organization that could expose the structure of his war or challenge his eventual hold on power. The Shadow Collective was a threat not because Maul could beat Sidious in a fight, but because its very existence proved the war was rigged, that both sides answered to the same master, and that anything operating outside his design had to be removed. The Clone Wars had spent seasons building the Black Sun, the Pike Syndicate, and the Hutt Cartel into real political forces with their own armies and territorial reach. Not background noise, but active players whose ambitions shaped the galaxy's power structure. The galaxy's underworld was not separate from the war, it was another front, and Palpatine fought it with the same precision he applied to everything else. The Shadow Collective arc would have been the payoff for all that work, the moment the show proved that the war everyone could see was only the surface of a much deeper struggle for total control. Maul's story from this point forward, across Shadow Lord, Solo, and Rebels, carries the weight of that revelation through the full arc of the Imperial era. Even the bounty hunter world was getting an origin story the show never finished. A planned arc paired young Boba Fett with the veteran hunter Cad Bane, casting Bane as a dark mentor who teaches Boba the skills that would make him the most feared bounty hunter in the galaxy. The arc was designed to end in a duel between the two, and footage from the unfinished version has surfaced at multiple celebration events over the years. At Celebration Japan, in April 2025, a newly revealed sequence showed Boba flying through the skyways of Coruscant with Anakin in full pursuit on a speeder bike. Bane observed from a distance alongside his droid Todo 360, while his young apprentice fought off a Jedi Knight on his own. Boba shot down Anakin's speeder. Anakin deflected a blaster bolt with his lightsaber, and the young hunter escaped by jetpack. Filoni described the dynamic as one where Jango Fett was Boba's good father, and after Jango's death, Cad Bane became his bad one. The arc was never completed, and later storytelling, including Cad Bane's appearance in the Book of Boba Fett, handled the rivalry differently. Footage shown at Celebration Orlando in 2017 revealed the intended ending, a Western-style duel where both hunters draw on each other, and Bane's shot leaves a dent in Boba's helmet that would become one of his most recognizable features. Boba Fett in the films had always been a silhouette and a reputation, and the Clone Wars had already begun turning that silhouette into a boy carrying his fallen father's armor. The Cad Bane arc would have finished that transformation, showing the moment a grieving boy chose to become the most feared figure in the galaxy and the old hunter who showed him how. Together, every cancelled arc described the same catastrophe from a different angle, not from top down, the way the films told it, from everywhere at once. The Jedi sanctioning political killings, while dark-side energy weakened their judgment from below. A democracy's last defenders traveling to the far edges of the galaxy to find allies who were already gone. Underworld empires being shattered, not by justice, but by a dictator clearing the board. A boy learning to kill from the best hunter alive. A soldier stranded without brothers. A former villain giving her life for love, while the order that sanctioned her end marched toward its own. A mother reaching through the Force one last time, before the darkness took her too. Every arc was a window into the same collapse, and the lost seasons would have opened all of them at once. Rogue One accomplished something similar in 2 hours, connecting the prequels to the original trilogy with emotional force. What the lost Clone Wars seasons were building was a wider version of that bridge. Not one story linking 2 eras, but a dozen stories reaching into every corner of the galaxy at the same time. Few Star Wars projects have tried to map that territory at this scale. That unfinished slate would have mapped military collapse, political failure, underworld warfare, moral corruption, and personal betrayal, all unfolding across the final months of the Republic. If this material had been produced, the Clone Wars would not be remembered as a companion piece to the prequels. It would be the most complete account of how a democracy became a dictatorship, and it was stopped at the exact moment its ambitions became impossible to miss. The lost material never stayed entirely lost. Ventress' return in Tales of the Underworld. Maul's story continued through Shadow Lord, and the Bad Batch gave Clone Force 99 3 full seasons. But the Rex and R2 survival story has no equivalent. The Kashyyyk arc has never been revisited. Mon Cala's political resistance remains unrealized. What came back was real, but what did not come back was more. One image still sits beneath everything else. The Jedi built their House of Light over something dark. They meditated above it, trained above it, governed above it, and never fully understood what was beneath them. No Star Wars show has ever gone beneath the temple floor and shown what was down there. It is still down there. The war that ended above that shrine did not start on its own. Palpatine needed it. Every engagement, every Senate vote it justified, every institution it weakened. The first year of the Clone Wars set all of it in motion, and the reasons it had to begin reached even further back.